Moirai, a small box card game about the three goddesses from Greek mythology, spinning a wheel in motion to weave the destiny of humankind. Clotho grants us points depending on how the lives begin. Lachesis blesses us if we are able to create lives with a specific structure. Atropos gives us points if we cut the lives in agreement with her orders. Moirai is a simple card game with an interesting discard mechanic that reminds me of games like Lost Cities or Arboretum. Can Moirai live up to those titans of the industry? And is that even a fair comparison? Let's find out in today's review. Moirai is incredibly easy to set up. Being a small box card game, most of our work is just shuffling this deck of cards. Once that's done, we need to get our endgame scoring goals, and that's going to come from these goddess decks. So each goddess has 4 goal cards associated with it, and we are just going to select one at random from each goddess and place that face up on the table. Now, all the goal cards we don't select are just going to be put back in the box, and we're not going to need them for the rest of this game. So right there, Moirai has a decent amount of replayability because these goal cards definitely add some variety to the game. You can have a lot of different combinations, and that means that each game you play with Moirai, you're probably going to have a slightly different approach to how you're going to choose what cards to play. So yeah, now that we have the goal card selected for this game, I like to explain these to the players because I would say the iconography on these is not crystal clear. But luckily, Devere, the publisher, plus the designer did a great job and added a reference on the back of the rulebook with a text-based description of each of the goal cards and an example of how to score that card. And that is greatly appreciated in this little rulebook here. So in the game that I have set up here, we have the Clotho is going to score 4 points per life less you have than the player with the most lives. So over the course of this game, we're going to be starting lives by placing these threads face down, and those are going to be the start of a new thread or a new life in the game. So here I would have 3 lives at the end of the game, and let's say another player has 5 lives, so I have 2 less than them. I'm going to score 2 times 4, that's 8 points for Clotho. So ideally I'm going to start fewer threads than my opponents. And then we have Lachesis, and this is going to be 4 points for each life with the most of a color in it. So there's 4 colors in the deck. There is red, green, purple, and blue. And basically if I have a thread, so if I have a life with the most red in it, I'm going to score 4 points for that life. And then finally, Atropos here, this is going to be minus 3 points for each uncut life at the end of the game. So Atropos, like I said, we're going to be starting lives with these threads, and then we're going to be adding to these lives. So this is going to be kind of, let's say, an event in that life. Then eventually, maybe I reach the end of a thread, and I'm like, I'm ready to end this thread, to end this life. And I can place that card face down, and now this is a completed thread. This is a completed life. And this will not score the negative points, but essentially if I don't manage to complete this one, Atropos is going to score -3 at the end of the game. Okay, now that we have those taken care of, we got one more step for setup, and that is just each player is going to draw 1 card from the top of the deck. They're not allowed to look at this. This is just their starting card. This is going to be their first life, the first thread that they are going to be working with. And now we'll move on to player turn. So the first player has the option to draw 3 cards from the deck and play one of those, discarding the other 2, or draw all the cards from 1 discard pile. You may notice I have no discard piles because we're at the start of the game. So my only option is to draw these 3 cards from the deck. So let's see what I get. I get a 3, 15, and a 28. Now I need to talk about the rules a little bit. Basically, when we get here, I am trying to decide which one's going to be most beneficial for me to play. Now, when playing a card, I have kind of 2 options. It's either I'm going to play a card face up or face down. So if I wanted to, I could start a new life. I could be like, I'm going to play this one face down, and now I have another life started. Or I could play a card face up. Face up will go on a current thread, and the only rule for that is it has to be in ascending order. So here I have the 3, that is in ascending order from the card that has nothing on it, so we're all set there. But let's say that I already had the 28 played here. And then now that 3 can't be played because that is not ascending order. And the other thing that I want to keep in mind is these goal cards up here. I know that Clotho wants me to start fewer lives, and I know that Lachesis here wants me to have a lot of a color in a life. So that's really incentivizing me to start low on these lives. I know I want to start with these low values, like this 3 looks really good, because that's going to allow me more time to kind of build up this thread, because I know these cards are numbered, I think, 0 to 80. And I really want to kind of give myself that flexibility to be able to add more cards in the future. So I'm going to choose that 3 to play face up to my current life, and I'm going to discard these other 2. And now these discard piles, there's actually 1 discard pile for each color in the game. So these are going to build up as other players discard them, and we'll get back to that being important later. But now it's going to move on to the next player's turn. They have the same option, either 3 cards from the deck or drawing all of one of the discard piles. And right now the discard piles aren't looking too enticing, so they're probably going to draw 3 cards from the deck, and I'm just going to give them a random one for their turn, and they're going to discard these 2 cards. Ooh, things got interesting fast here. So now we have 3 red cards in the discard pile, and that's looking a little more enticing for me because remember, when I'm drawing 3 cards from the deck, it's a random draw, and I could be adding more red cards to that discard pile. So this is really where that tension comes from in this game, because you are kind of trying to manage this pacing in the game, because every time you draw from the deck, you're only adding 1 card to your tableau. It's usually better to add more cards to your tableau. You want to be able to add more cards. So if you have the option to add more, you probably are going to take that option. So drawing from that discard is extremely beneficial. Or just drawing, like let's say for some reason I needed this 28. Sometimes taking that to delay the game, to force my opponent to draw from the deck, that can be beneficial to me, because then I'm not giving them more options on their turn. I'm kind of reducing their ability to add cards to their tableau. So in this case, I'm looking at this and I'm like, you know what? This red pile right here is looking fantastic for me. So I'm going to take this. And now when you draw from the discard pile, you have kind of the same options you do when drawing from here, but you're going to be playing all the cards that you just took. And you may play only up to 1 of them face down. You don't have to play any face down, but if you want to, you can play up to 1 of them face down. So that means I could play 1 face down to start a life, or I could play 1 face down to end a life, to cut that thread. But in this case, I'm looking at this, I'm saying, you know, I got a 15, a 19, and a 43. That is looking like a pretty good way to continue this life, so I'm just going to add that to this one right here, and this is looking great for Lachesis over here, because that is a lot of red cards in that column. And then it's going to go on to my opponent's turn, and we're just going to continue this. They'll take 1 card, they'll fill back in the discard pile here, and then it'll go on to me, and same thing, and we'll just keep on doing that back and forth until this deck empties. Once this deck is empty, that player is going to finish off their turn, and the game will be over. Then we'll move on to final scoring. So that's all there is to Moirai. It's really a very simple game to play, it's easy to teach, and I think the only kind of hiccup is really at the end when we're going to that scoring. It can be a bit of a pain to kind of figure out who gets what at the very end, counting up to see who has the most colors in one column. It's not exactly like the most challenging one. Usually it goes by pretty quickly with the scoring, but it is kind of one of those things that's, for me, a pet peeve. I've talked about this in another game. I think I've mentioned it in Naishi. Reaching the end of the game and doing that score calculation, especially for smaller card games, is really a bit of a turnoff for me, I would say. But not the biggest barrier to this game. So let's get into what are my thoughts on this game. Like, is this actually a good game? Now, I mentioned in the intro 2 other games. I called out Lost Cities and Arboretum. The reason I called those games out is because when I looked at this game, when I looked at this rule book, those are the games that came to my mind, with this discarding cards, with this tempo consideration, with building up these columns for scoring and everything. I was like, man, this is sounding like it has some similarities to Lost Cities. And then also that discard and people being able to draw from it. I went to Arboretum a little bit because of how Arboretum's discard worked. So I just want to kind of call out a comparison of those games and answer that question on whether that comparison's fair. And overall, this game does not have the same tension that like Lost Cities or Arboretum has. Lost Cities is you have a hand management component to it. You are trying to build up those paths. You're trying to build up a single color path, and then you're discarding cards which your opponent can potentially take into their hand to play to their path. So you are playing this game where you're looking at the cards in your hand and you're trying to debate on when is it more beneficial for you to keep a card that you need versus keeping a card that you know your opponent needs. So you constantly have that tension of being like, oh, I know you need this card. I don't think I want to set this one down, because if I do, I think you're going to take it. So you're constantly holding it and being like, I don't want you to know I have this. I don't want you to know it's available. But then it's also clogging up your hand to be able to do the things that you want to do. And that's even more so in Arboretum. Like in Arboretum, you can clearly see what trees people are going for, and you have that hand management system, which is going to really determine who scores what at the end of the game. So you can kind of hold these cards that you know can just like wreck another player at the end of the game. And you know that, yeah, it's clogging up your hand, and maybe another card in your hand would be more beneficial for you, but if you get rid of that card, you know that your opponent's going to score a boatload of points, and you're like, ooh, that might be too good for them. So if you put that in your discard, you know they're going for it right away, because other players can draw from your discard. So it's that risk. That risk versus reward? Like, do you continue holding that card to kind of keep your opponent down, or do you get rid of that card so you have the possibility to score potentially more points? And those two games really bring out a lot of tension between the players. Now, I will say, Lost Cities, it doesn't feel as aggressive. I would say because you don't really know what cards people have and how the scoring plays out in the end, you're never really totally blocking someone from scoring the points they need. You're kind of reducing their score by holding on to certain cards. But not really a super aggressive head-to-head game. Arboretum, though, feels very aggressive. At the end game, when you prevent someone from scoring any points, like, ooh, it just feels mean. Like, some people just hate it. Now, I'm going to call out that I am not that person. I love Arboretum. I love Arboretum's scoring system. It has that thing where you have to do the point calculation at the end, which I've already mentioned I kind of hate, but I just love how Arboretum plays out at the end so much with that scoring, with people holding on to cards and like wrecking other people's ability to score points on the trees that they were trying to build those paths for, like taking that risk, making that big swing to go for those points and just not being able to pull it off at the end. Some people feel absolutely terrible about this, but I find it just entertaining and funny, especially when someone does it to me. I'm like, oh man, good play. Like yeah, that type of situation. But I'm going to mention that a lot of my friends don't want to play Arboretum. Not a lot of people like getting to the end of the game and being like, oh, we score 0 points here, we score 0 points here, we score 0 points here. Yeah, for a lot of people, that is not an exciting end game to that. So that's where I'm going to jump back over to Moirai really quick. And this is, well, not really quick, that's the rest of the video, right? So Moirai doesn't have the same tension that I get in like Lost Cities and Arboretum. And for me, that doesn't make Moirai bad. It's not a bad game by any means. To me, it's uninteresting. And I feel bad even saying that because like that sounds meaner than being bad. To me, it's just not engaging to play. Whereas something like Arboretum, very engaging to play. But that might not be a knock on this game if you're the type of person that's like, no, keep Arboretum as far away from me as possible. Moirai might be more your speed, because it's not really a head-to-head experience. I would say that even though it has that discard mechanic, like where you're putting these cards in the discard that are going to be available to other players, I never really feel like I'm blocking anyone from doing anything. I'm really just giving them more options. Every time I draw from this deck and I have to discard 2 cards, I'm really just giving the next player more options to choose from. So every time that it comes back to me, I'm really just evaluating the current game state. I'm just saying, oh, what's in the discard? Do those help me towards any of these goals? Nope, so I'm going to draw from the deck this time and move on. I'm not really paying too much attention to what other people are doing with their tableau. If I wanted to, I could probably look at their tableau and be like, oh, you're going for more red cards, and I drew cards and I have 2 reds, so I might want to play a red card so that way you don't get a bunch of red cards. Like, you can definitely kind of glance over and get a rough idea of what people are doing. But for the most part, like, since you don't have that hand management component, since you're not storing cards away from other players, you really don't have an incentive to play a card that another person has unless it also works for you. So that changes up the dynamic in Moirai a little bit. It really reduces that tension, and for some people, I think that's going to be a great thing. For me, it just kind of dropped below the level of the engagement that I need, the tension that I need to keep me interested in coming back to Moirai over and over again. Now, I do really like the variability in it. I think these various goal cards really do change things up. Now, I do have a bit of a negative with those as well, because I also want to kind of jump back to Lost Cities and Arboretum. These goal cards, they do vary the gameplay a little bit, but I would say they make it hard to judge the state of other people. Like, sure, Clotho here, I can see how many lives someone has started, but I don't know when they're going to start more lives. I can't really force them to start more lives than me. It's just going to be however the cards fall out. Or how maybe I ruin the pacing and I'm drawing from the deck too often, or something along those lines. It's not really like I have any ability to make them score negatively or whatever. And I think that's a bit of a, for me, is also a downside, because in Lost Cities, it is very clear to me what my opponent is trying to do. I clearly see what their objective is and what they're currently building up, and I have a great idea of what I need to hold back from them. Same thing with Arboretum. I clearly can look across the board and I can see like, oh, this is what you're trying to do. This is the tree that you need, and move on from that part. And even something like Sea Salt and Paper. This is it's a very light card game, and I would say it has some card variability in it, but you know, like if someone, let's say someone took a seashell, you saw them take a seashell from the discard pile, and you draw a seashell on your next turn. Now you're wondering like, oh, I might want to hold on to this because I know they're looking for seashells, so I don't want to put it in that discard, because if they see it, they're going to go for it. They're going to go diving for those seashells, and that's one of those. It's one of those things where you can kind of have a very clear picture of what other people are trying to achieve during the game. Whereas I never really achieved that in Moirai. I never really got to the point where I was able to look at someone else's board and be like, oh, you're going for this card. So I can't really make those judgments to make those blocking plays to really ratchet up that tension in this game. It kind of feels a little more on the Euro end of things. Not a resource management game, not a Euro at all. It's just, it kind of has that interaction where the other players are kind of changing up the game state a little bit. So when it gets to my turn, like I said, it's really, I'm looking at that discard pile and saying, hey, anything beneficial in there? Is this looking good for me? And then my other question is, well, if I draw 3 cards from here, am I going to make it too good for someone else? So maybe I just want to take something from the discard pile, not so I don't improve the next player's situation. Those are really the main interactive decisions I'm making. I don't really care what their board looks like, to be honest, during the game. So those are my negatives for this. And for me, this is a game that is going to be leaving my collection. I just don't find it engaging enough. I would rather bring out something like Arboretum. But like I said, that might not be a negative for you, because maybe you're that person that's like, Arboretum is way too mean for me. I don't ever want to play that game again. Moirai may give you that variety, may give you kind of that, it's a little more solitaire in that puzzly nature, but you do have, like I said, those goals have the competition there. It's just, can you control the outcome of those goals? I don't know. Maybe not. So how much influence do you have over your final position in the game? It really comes down to the pacing of this draw deck, how you manage that pacing of the draw deck, how you manage the pacing with getting cards from that discard pile. So I do think there are some interesting decisions in here. There are some interesting scoring criteria in here. There are some really interesting design stuff in here. And I honestly love the art on this. That's actually why I picked up Moirai. That's why I made the intro I made for this game, because I thought this game just looked beautiful and I really wanted to give it a try. So that's going to do it for my final thoughts of Moirai. I hope that this video was useful to you. I do want to call out that I put a little more effort into the intro of this video than I usually do, because I just wanted to, you know, play around with some video editing stuff. I even changed up my scenery here as well. So if you like the new style, definitely let me know. Give me a thumbs up, or, you know, I never asked for this, but, you know, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, because that will kind of incentivize me to keep on working on this, continue improving my, let's say, my craft at creating this content and delivering higher quality board game YouTube videos. So with that being said, I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for spending your time with me, and I will talk to you next time.